What if the peace that has held in Europe for decades crumbles and nuclear war erupts? What would this mean for Greece, a nation teetering on the precipice of this global crisis? Picture this. It's midnight in Athens. The Acropolis stands silent under the moonlight, a beacon of resilience. For over 2,500 years, then air raid sirens scream, breaking the calm. Citizens flood the streets as fear grips the city. In the distance, a mushroom cloud rises, its fiery glow illuminating the horizon. This is no exercise. Nuclear war has come to Europe. With NATO and Russia edging closer to conflict, fueled by the devastating war in Ukraine, this doomsday scenario is becoming disturbingly plausible. Greece, positioned at the crossroad of Europe, Asia, and Africa, and home to NATO's critical Souda Bay naval base, faces unique vulnerabilities. As the specter of nuclear war looms larger, one question arises: how would Greece, a nation that relies on stability for its tourism-driven economy and its cultural legacy, cope if the unthinkable happens? In this video, we'll uncover Greece's unique risks, its level of preparedness, and the steps it could take to mitigate such a catastrophe, so follow closely. Now, to understand Greece's potential fate in a nuclear war, we first need to grasp the global domino effect such a conflict would unleash. Imagine this: a single nuclear strike, perhaps on a NATO base in Eastern Europe, triggers NATO's Article 5. This clause, which mandates collective defense, means that one attack on a member state could plunge all 32 NATO nations into war. In response, NATO retaliates, and within hours, nuclear weapons begin raining down on strategic targets across Europe and possibly the United States. Historically, nuclear devastation has been catastrophic. The bomb dropped on Hiroshima in 1945 killed approximately 140,000 people within months, while the fallout affected generations. Yet, modern nuclear warheads are far more powerful. Russia's RS-28 Sarmat, for example, has a payload of 50 megatons, more than 3,300 times the explosive power of the Hiroshima bomb. A single strike from such a weapon could annihilate an entire city, with thermal radiation causing third-degree burns up to 8 kilometers away. But the damage wouldn't stop there. Fallout would spread via wind and weather patterns, contaminating areas hundreds, even thousands of kilometers from the blast site. For instance, during the Chernobyl disaster of 1986, radioactive particles traveled over 2,000 kilometers, affecting parts of Scandinavia, Germany, and Greece itself. In a nuclear war, this would happen on a much larger scale, with entire regions rendered uninhabitable for decades. The economic impact would be equally disastrous. Experts estimate that even a limited nuclear exchange could slash global GDP by as much as 10% in a single year, triggering a worldwide depression. Trade routes would collapse, food supplies would dwindle, and millions would face starvation. Greece, a nation that imports nearly 50% of its food and relies on tourism for 20% of its GDP, would face an economic crisis of unimaginable proportions. Amid the chaos, how would Greece, a country already grappling with high public debt of around 355 billion euros, hold its ground? And as NATO's eastern flank burns, would Greece be drawn deeper into the inferno? Before we address these questions, I thought you should know it takes huge amounts of time to make these videos for you. So we're inviting you to support our channel by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Thanks for that, and let's continue. Greece's location is both a blessing and a curse. Sitting at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa, it's a cornerstone of NATO's strategy, but also a prime target in any NATO-Russia conflict. Take Souda Bay, for example, located on Crete. It's not just a naval base. It's one of NATO's most critical Mediterranean hubs, overseeing Russian activity in the Black Sea and Eastern Mediterranean. For Russia, knocking out Souda Bay would be an obvious first step. But Souda Bay isn't the only target that makes Greece vulnerable. The nation's other strategic military sites would also draw the enemy's attention, each playing a role in the unfolding conflict. The Larissa Air Base, home to U.S. MQ-9 Reaper drones, plays a crucial role in surveillance and intelligence. The port of Alexandroupolis, just 30 kilometers from Turkey, has become a lifeline for NATO military shipments heading to Eastern Europe. And then there's the Aegean Sea. Its thousands of islands and choke points make it a naval chessboard critical to controlling the Eastern Mediterranean. Greece's geography isn't just strategic, it's a double-edged sword. Every base, every port, and every choke point increases its exposure. To further complicate matters, Greece's position as a NATO member offers protection under Article 5, but also makes it a top target for Russian retaliation. This is nothing new. During the Cold War, Greece was a vital NATO outpost near the Soviet Union. Today, its role hasn't changed. Only now, the stakes are nuclear. Even with defense spending at 3.54% of GDP, which is among the highest in NATO, Greece's outdated infrastructure and heavy reliance on imported energy of nearly 75% of its consumption make it vulnerable in a prolonged conflict. And with such a troubling backdrop, we turn to an even more pressing question. Is Greece truly prepared to protect its people in case a nuclear war breaks out? When it comes to nuclear preparedness, Greece is alarmingly unready. While global tensions soar, many countries have built robust civil defense systems. Greece, however, remains dangerously exposed with little in place to protect its population. Unlike countries like Norway, where bunkers are mandatory and regularly maintained, Athens, which is home to centuries-old marble columns, offers no modern shelters for nuclear fallout. Few underground spaces like metro stations or aging military bunkers are not built to withstand modern nuclear strikes or prolonged radiation exposure. Public education is another glaring gap. While nations like Switzerland routinely update their citizens on shelter locations and survival protocols, most Greeks wouldn't know where to turn. Surveys reveal that over 80% of the population has no idea what to do in a nuclear emergency. There are no public awareness campaigns, and school curriculums don't address these risks. Making matters worse, Greece's geography amplifies its vulnerabilities. A nuclear strike on Istanbul or Eastern Europe could send radioactive fallout over northern Greece within 24 to 48 hours, depending on wind patterns. Thessaloniki could become uninhabitable for weeks, and even Athens, further south, wouldn't escape unscathed. With no shelters, no education, and no clear plan, one question looms: can Greece survive the economic and environmental fallout of a real nuclear war? The immediate horrors of a nuclear conflict would be horrific, but for Greece, the aftermath could prove just as devastating. A nation whose economy thrives on tourism, trade, and agriculture would find itself crippled in ways that could take generations to recover from. Tourism, the backbone of Greece's economy, contributes 18.2 billion euros annually, nearly 20% of its GDP. Yet, in a post-nuclear Europe, the breathtaking views of Santorini and the timeless beauty of the Acropolis could fall eerily silent, not because of direct hits, but from the invisible fear of radiation. Even if these sites escape contamination, the psychological scars of nuclear fallout would drive tourists away for decades. Islands that once thrived on their hospitality industries would collapse, their hotels abandoned, and local economies in ruins. Airlines would cut routes, and the allure of Greece's sun-drenched coast would fade under the shadow of a nuclear disaster. But it's not just tourism that would take a hit. Greece's shipping industry, a global powerhouse responsible for 7% of worldwide seaborne trade, depends on the Aegean Sea. This vital waterway would become a war zone in a nuclear conflict, with radiation and debris halting trade routes. Ships would be rerouted, insurance costs would skyrocket, and Greece's ports could grind to a standstill. For a country heavily reliant on imported energy, these disruptions would send energy prices soaring, sparking inflation and crippling households and businesses alike. Then there's the land itself. Radiation from nuclear fallout would poison Greece's fertile farmlands, turning once productive fields into barren wastelands. A country that produces 60% of its own fruits and vegetables would suddenly face a food crisis, forced to rely on expensive imports. Meanwhile, the radiation would seep into the seas, devastating fisheries in the Aegean and Ionian, cutting off a critical source of food and income for coastal communities. Even water supplies wouldn't be safe, leaving the population to grapple with shortages of clean drinking water amid rising prices for basic necessities. In the end, fallout would not just destroy Greece's present, it would jeopardize its future for generations. This is a sobering reminder of why Greece must prepare not only for the immediate threat of nuclear war, but also for the long-term challenges it would bring. In the next section, we'll explore how Greece's diplomatic decisions could shape its survival strategy in a post-conflict world. In the aftermath of a nuclear conflict, Greece would face life or death choices that could shape its future for decades. Would it double down on NATO support, risking further attacks as a frontline ally? Or could it pivot toward neutrality, a move that might shield its people from harm but risk isolating the nation on a global stage? This is the ultimate diplomatic gamble, and there's no easy answer. Greece's role as a NATO member and host to key military installations, like the Souda Bay naval base, ties it firmly to the alliance's collective defense. Yet, history shows Greece has sometimes walked a fine line, leveraging its strategic geography to avoid becoming a battleground. Could it adopt a similar approach now in a post-nuclear world? Or is the reality of modern warfare too unforgiving for neutrality to succeed? Pressure from allies would be immense. The United States, Greece's strongest military backer, would demand loyalty in exchange for the billions it has invested in Greece's defense. At the same time, Greece's complex relationship with Russia would face a reckoning. As a key energy supplier, Russia's role in Greece's economy could force difficult compromises or lead to total severance. And then there's the wild card. Turkey. Long-standing disputes over the Aegean, Cyprus, and territorial waters could flare up at the worst possible moment. In the chaos of a nuclear conflict, Turkey might see an opportunity to exploit Greece's divided focus, pushing territorial claims and further destabilizing the region. Which begs the question, will Greece rise to shape its destiny? Or will it become a pawn in the relentless games of global powers? The reality is that Greece stands at a crossroad where history and destiny collide. Its geography, once a blessing, now places it perilously close to the fires of conflict. But Greece has faced impossible odds before, against empires, invaders, and crisis, and each time it has endured. Yet in a world shadowed by nuclear threats, survival requires more than resilience. Preparedness is no longer an abstract concept, it's a necessity. Without fortified civil defenses, clear evacuation plans, and strategic diplomacy, Greece risks becoming not just collateral damage, but a forgotten casualty in a global power struggle. Would Greece invest in protecting its people, building bunkers, educating citizens, and creating contingency plans? Or would it rely on its alliances, gambling on NATO's protection while walking a fine line of diplomatic independence? These choices will determine whether Greece emerges stronger or succumbs to chaos. But let's not forget that Greece's strength has always come from its people, the same spirit that defied empires, rebuilt from ashes, and gave the world democracy and philosophy. That unyielding spirit is still alive today. What do you think Greece needs to do to survive and thrive in an uncertain future? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more in-depth analysis and discussions on the issue that shaped our world today.